Hi, this is Chris, the guitar amp tech from Sydney, Australia. And today we've got the amp, which is probably behind most hits recorded since the 60s. In fact, this is, I'm pretty sure it's a 1964, but we'll check the codes on the transformers when we get in there. And I reckon it's going to be a real gem. I haven't powered it up yet, don't know what's wrong with it, but I'm not going to power it up until I make sure that it's safe to do so. I reckon we're going to learn heaps out of this. So go grab yourself a coffee, as usual, one for me, and mine, let's have it in the surf green cup, my favourite, and we'll do a double shot flat white, and hurry up, back here, let's get started. I've pulled out the chassis and flipped this around to have a look at what speaker we got here. Early 60s blackface amps would have transitioned to an Oxford speaker, I think, around this stage. This is Eminence, good speaker, not the original speaker, but it's pretty good. Oh, that's beautiful. Surf green cup, candy apple red sauce. Oh, what's this? Where's my Greek Paksimati? Hey, what's wrong with a Scottish shortbread, you twat? Oh, nothing, I suppose. Funny story. Last time I did that and I passed a cup over an amplifier, someone pulled me up on it and said I would never take my amp to someone who puts his coffee over the amplifier. Apparently it's a sign of disrespect, and well, everyone has to have a basis for judging their amp tech, I suppose, and if how I drink my coffee is his basis of judging, then I fail that test. All right, let's have a look at these. So here we have a power transformer, 606, Schumacher branding 4, which means 1964. So this is probably the first year of production of the blackface. 38th week, what's that? Is that September or something like that? 606, Schumacher 64. Can't read that one. 606, 64, 31st week. So very close. Reverb transformer, 606, 5. Okay, so this one's a couple of years, a year newer. So either this amp is a 65 or this was changed in its first year. All right. So someone's obviously been in here. So here we have our two much maligned IC branded caps, these RS caps. Let's just measure them. We're not just going to throw them out because we don't like the branding. Now, sometimes I think these are paralleled, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check. 0 ohms. 0 ohms. Okay, so these are in parallel. So if they are, what are they? It's 22. That's also 22. So we should see 44 microfarad. This is measuring using my very accurate ESR meter, which I've set to, oops, no I haven't. I've set it now to 100 Hertz. And we want to see, now because these are in parallel, I'm also going to parallel the impedances. So 222s are going to be near enough to 47, and we're going to be looking at this impedance. So I want to see a maximum of around about 2 ohms. Not going to be rigid about it, but near enough. So that is 45 ohms, spot on, with 1.5 ohms. So not bad, even though that looks like it's bulging a bit to me. Okay, let's go down the line. This is 22, and it should be reading maximum 3. and it's reading 5.4, so it's definitely gone. Gone. 4.9 ohms. Oh, the capacitance reading is 24 microfarads. So someone would read that without looking at ESR would go, oh, that's fine. It's not. Because the ESR is increasing, that means it has a higher internal resistance. Resistance, as you know, when current passes through it causes heat. Heat is the enemy of capacitors. So anything with a high ESR is going to slowly start killing itself from the inside. This one's 22 microfarad, and we're reading 25 microfarad at 2.4. So that's okay. Those two aren't. I can see a bulge here. So I'm going to replace that, and I'm not going to leave one old one in this. Even though it tests okay, it's a filter cap. Our sound does not pass through filter caps. Filter caps are like engine oil in a car. You know, it's a consumable item and doesn't reflect its value. More important is the coupling caps on the inside. Okay, this is interesting. So we've got two 10K dropping resistors. This confirms that it's an AA763 and not an AB763, which is the next iteration, because it had 10K and I think 22 or 27K. So let's see how close these are. It's 10K. These always drift up. We'll accept anything up to 11K, and that is 10.35. That's okay. And this is 11.5, so it's gone up 15%. So here's for the bin. That's barely budged from spec, so I'm going to leave that in. Right, so my first task, replace these. I think from memory, and I'll check the schematic, I think these were, I think they were all 16 microfarad. I don't mind the 22 there for the main reservoir cap, because that gives us 45. I like a nice big reservoir cap. And that next one, I would probably leave at 22. And these two I'll probably replace at 16. So I've used two 20 microfarad ones. Previous tech had put in 22. 20 is more the sort of vintage value. So two 20s in parallel, which will give us 40 microfarad, which is a little bit more filtering than the original two 16s. Likewise, I chose to put a 20 for the screen grids, just to give us a little bit more stable, stiffer voltage for the screen grids, and to give us just a little bit more of that leaning into the sound. I've gone back to the original two 16s, 16 there and a 16 there for the two preamp stages. So that's nice and neat. Notice all the leads are nice and straight. All the labels are facing upwards with the values visible for the next tech, should it not be me. And I've replaced that 10K resistor there. That one was spot on. This one is spot on. I think this little section now will be nice and stable and reliable for at least the next 10 years of this 60-year-old amplifier. All right, it's Monday morning, 7 a.m. I flipped the chassis over, and already I'm confronted with my first problem of the day. Do I have my first coffee with Dakota Red or Daphne Blue? Or maybe my all-time favourite, Surf Green.
Why no, Dad? Why don't you have it in Blackie? You hardly ever have Blackie.
You're right, but I think it's my prejudice against the Blackie and Brownie sound that Clapton used.
after coming from his Les Paul and his 335 and his SG to go to that thin, twangy sound. But, all right, you're my apprentice, so I will go with Blackie. Here we go. Morning coffee, Blackie cup, Dakota Red saucer. Always check the power wiring first. Here it is, it's been replaced with modern Australian wiring. First thing I don't like is I don't like the way the earth lead, this is our mains earth lead, is attached to the transformer mounting bolt. That's going to go. That's not a secure, reliable connection. And there is always a very good chance, and we'll have a look, I expect this will have, there will be oxidation between the chassis and that washer and that nut, perhaps even rust, but at the very least we'll have oxidation and gunk in there, which is going to diminish our earth contact. So that's going to come off. I will solder it directly to the chassis as the old Fenders used to do. Now, active, let's have a look. This should go to the fuse first. Let's have a look. Active is not. It's going to the switch first. Illegal, wrong. From the switch, it goes to the transformer. Huh, okay. That's going to tell me that the neutral, the blue wire, is indeed going to the fuse. So I don't know in whose country in the world fusing the neutral is legal, safe or recommended, but certainly not here. So I'm going to rewire this so we have the active going directly to the rear of the fuse, coming out of the front of the fuse to the switch to the transformer. Now there's been a few changes of components here. This looks like it's a capacitor to reduce the ticking sound of that tremolo. We'll have a look and see if that's still doing its job. We'll leave that in. If it's not, I'll replace that tremolo optocouple. We've still got the old Astron cathode bypass caps. We'll check those. There's been some resistor changes here. There's two there. These sets of plate resistors have all been replaced by metal film. The blue is a bit clashing to my eye, but I know this owner is a professional performer and he uses this amp for recording and performance. Even though my heart says replace them with cathode composition ones like this, I'm going to leave those metal films in there because they're quieter. There'll be less snap, crackle, pop and hiss. Really happy to see all the original blue mouldeds still in there. I'm sure they're going to be fine, but I will be checking them for leakage. These ones I will test. I'm expecting that they will not be okay, but we'll test them. What else? There's been some changes here. This is in our reverb driver. We'll check these values against the schematic. So that's obviously a carbon film. That's a new fella. Other than that, it looks extremely original. Of course, I'll check the screen grid resistors, make sure they're still in spec, and the grid stoppers. Make sure those 1.5Ks are still 1.5King. And we've had some changes here in the bias circuit. Let's change the diode, which is a good thing, and put in a new bias cap, 100 by 100, that's all right. It's all a bit grubby, isn't it? Looks like it's got decades of WD-40, which has just become gunk on here. We've got some corrosion happening here, and seeing it's at the input jack and here as well, I expect that's some sort of agent that's been used in there to quote-unquote clean those, which obviously over the decades since that was done, it's just solidified into that gunge. I may try and give this a bit of a clean. I'm a bit concerned about what might be underneath there. It looks like we might have some original factory stamps here, so I will probably avoid cleaning this area because I don't want to remove those original markings. Not that you can see them. Someone in the future may be able to figure out how to remove that gunge. rather than spending frustrating minutes trying to find the correct socket, 1132 socket for these, I'll just put a little bit of dab of my Friday night nail polish on it just to make it easier to stand out in the crowd. And that's going to go. I'm just curious to see, do we have any gunge under here? A little bit there. Pretty good on the nut. And the previous tech had done the right thing and cleaned that up before attaching it to the wrong place. And I say the wrong place because a transformer can move because of its weight. That will cause, as you can see there, that bolt is moving a bit. So I'm just going to make it permanent until someone has a great big whacking soldering iron like I do, my 120 watt Weller. And I want this to come up because that's where I'm going to put my new ground connection. Here's the rear view of the chassis, and you'll see where the mains lead comes in. I've disconnected all those wires because I'm going to rewire that. And he's got the previous tech put in a rubber grommet. Now that's a good idea because it protects the lead from the sharp edges of the chassis. And we don't want the chassis to cut into that lead, or else we could be connecting active to the chassis. And if we don't have a good chassis connection, as I wasn't too happy about that. But even though rubber grommet's good, there's one problem with it. Let me show you. Oh, it doesn't offer much protection for the lead being pulled out. So we're going to remove that rubber grommet and we're going to replace it with one of these traditional Fender cable glands. It's a bit of a hard press to get it in there, but it'll offer much better protection to the lead than that. Not sure if you can notice that's not a perfectly round hole, so I've got flattened sides, which helps with the installation. Getting there, getting there, getting there. And now here's the challenging bit. Got a couple of tools that I use to get this in. One, obviously the vice grips, and then I've got this other specific one for crimping down on that cable gland. It's a bastard of a job to get in, but that is now so secure, I know that's never going to pull out. All right, let's get on with our mains wiring. I'm going to put my solder pad for the earth wiring. I want to stay away from that transformer, big thermal mass. I'm thinking maybe around about there. Off come my glasses, and on come my safety glasses, because I'm now going to put a wire brush at the end of my Dremel tool. And it's not a matter of if one of those little metal brush bits will go flying off. It will go flying off, and of all the places it can go, it will go into my eye. So I wear my glasses, and let's just give this a bit of a... That looks like nice, clean, shiny metal to me. And we'll just give it a bit of extra flux. Right. I want to get a good dollop of solder on there. Just let this heat up the chassis a bit. Beautiful. Now, there's a good little poking stick. Just give this a bit of a wind. Because I want to have my earth wire as the longest wire in the chassis. Like, even though it is now, with that proper cable gland, unlikely to pull through, I want the last thing to get yanked out to be the earth lead. All right. See if I can do this without burning the insulation. Now that is never going to be a problem. And I'm now going to put some of my Thursday night clear nail polish on that, just a bit of belt and braces, make sure that no moisture ever gets in there. And that is now going to be a safe and quiet earth connection. Now I know Leo never did this, but it's just to let the rest of the world know that that is our mains ground connection, and we don't ever want that one to come off again. Let's do the neutral first. Now as you can see here is the wrongly installed neutral wire going to the fuse, which was fine in the 2-prong days, not fine in the 3-prong grounded wire days. So I'm going to now just remove this. All right, now that's the neutral's hardwired into the voltage selector to 240 volts. So I don't want that switch accidentally being turned. And here's our active. First port of call for the active will be the rear part of the fuse. Let's just remove this. Take the fuse out. Sometimes that acts a bit of a heat sink. That's better. I'll keep that old cloth covered wire. I think we may need this. And I'll remove this. Okay, now the active is going to go there. Now the active goes straight from the power lead to the back part of the fuse. The back part of the fuse is so when we're removing this, that is still going to be contacting that, and we don't want to get an accidental zap. So by putting it to the back, that disconnects it. And from the fuse, it's going to go to the mains switch. All right, now you tuck back there. The mains can go there. And the neutral goes there. So we now have this switch not connected, and I have another application for that in mind. Instead of just leaving it there totally deaded. How long is this? That'll work. Not sure if you can see that, but I've just noticed there is a dry joint right there. And that resistor is just moving around. In fact, it'll probably even come right out. Yeah, there you go. That is a dry joint. Let's just have a look and see what this 47 ohm resistor here is, which had the dry joint. So here's our phase inverter tube, and that's that classic little three-way connection. It's in a phase inverter, which is basically this here. And this is our bias resistor, 470 ohm. And this is our tail resistor, the 27K. Huh, that's odd. That's 22K, 27K. I didn't think 22K came in until the AB763. So once again, this is a little bit of a transition thing. So that 47K, sorry, where that 22K joins the 47 ohm is right there. And it's that connection there that had that dry joint. So our long tail pair would have had a pretty shoddy reference to ground. I measured this 47 ohm resistor, and it was 52 ohm, which is not too bad for its purpose. So I'm not going to change that, I'm going to leave it original. So I thought I might as well measure the long tail resistor here, which is 22, and it measured at 25. So you think, oh, that's a fair way out. I might change that. What is that? 25 divided by 22, it's 13% out. But don't forget, the next iteration of this amp, of the Deluxe Reverb blackface, had a 27K tail resistor there. So this one is actually halfway between the AA and the AB763, so I'm going to leave it. Now, do you remember what the long tail resistor, the tail resistor, sorry, in a long tail pair does? It basically, it's provided to set like a constant current, an emulated constant current for your long tail pair. And the larger the value of that tail resistor, the better the balance between your inverted and non-inverted signals. But the price you pay is reduced gain. So that's always been a bit of a balancing act for manufacturers. I'm now going to check the two cathode bypass capacitors. If the capacitors are within, say, 10%, let's say anything under 30 microfarad, that'll do. If the ESR is equivalency resistance, if that is less than 3 ohms, they will stay. So I like them, they're original. They've been in here for 60 years. Let's see what they're like now. Now I've set my ESR meter to 400 hertz, and because this will have audio frequency levels, unlike the filter caps, which are going to be 100 hertz. So I've set these to 400 hertz, which is roughly A flat on the 5th fret high E string, 440 being A, of course. This looks a bit scary. Ooh, 115 microfarad. 162 microfarad. Do we hear anything more? 137 microfarad. Just out of curiosity, I know my instrument and I know it reads in circuit, but just for completeness, I'm just going to lift a leg. That was what, 136 or something. All right, these will both get replaced. I haven't got, well, I do have, but they're just too big. I've got F&T double 25s, but they're huge. So I'm going to put in this tube amp Doctor pair of 25 at 25, like the original Fenders. So I'll get those in, set my fluke up here so you can see it a bit better. I noticed something interesting here. When I was looking at this capacitor here, I had to lift it up so I could read the values. That's why it's really important to make sure that your capacitor values are always facing upwards, so that the next tech, like I had to now remove that cap, or at least this leg, so I could have a look and see that it was the correct value. And I noticed that that's 100K cathode resistor there, which I'm pretty sure this should be 56K. So that's another clue, because it's 100K in the AB763. So either someone has changed it along its history, or it was a transition model where some components were changed. So I just want to check some of these other important things here. Now let's have a look at the grid, screen grid resistor. It should be 470. Perfect. Perfect. Grid resistor should be 1.5K. 1.9. 1.9. The actual value doesn't really matter that much. It could be 1.5, it could be 4.7. It doesn't really much matter. I just want to see them the same. So the fact that they've both drifted up exactly the same amount is fine by me. Let's just double check. I'm reading this upside down. That looks like pretty much exactly 1.99. And this one, 1.99. Yep, I'm going to leave those original carbon comps as they are. Now likewise with the grid leaks here, they're 220K. Once again, their exact value doesn't worry me that much as their matchedness. So it should be 220, it's 260. 256. I'm inclined to leave it. Let's have a look. 256, divide that by 220. 16% over. Once again, it's not the value, it's are they matched. So here's the bias voltage that comes in here where they join and they go off to each of the grids of the two tubes there. So it's more that we want these matched. Once again, the value itself isn't that critical. So if one was 220 and the other one was 260, we'd be changing them, but they're not. They're both pretty much identical, and so I'm going to leave those as well. And I know people will be throwing abuse at me, but I don't care. I am a conservator of amplifiers, vintage amps. I'm not a let's go and replace everything. If it's noisy, bingo, they're out. If one was one value, one was the other value, they're out. But they've both drifted up the same way, which is what carbon comps do anyway, so they're staying. Those of you that think we should change everything on a vintage amp, start abusing me now. Now, I tested the two power tubes earlier. They are fairly mismatched, as you can see.